Like, you shouldn't be discriminated on how you speak.
He got kicked out of that family. It was a huge scandal.
No way. There are stereotypes.
First point happened to me when we just arrived into the States.
What tricks did you use with yourself to make your accent better? Communication is really how you can natively perceive the language. A lot of you think that a bad accent cannot be changed. That if you have built a bad sounding accent in your childhood, it's there with you for the rest of your life. It's such a common myth. And a lot of my clients that come to me to work on their accent are first like, oh, I didn't even know accents can be changed later in life. I thought that whatever I had in my childhood, I'm gonna carry on speaking with for the rest of my life. Hi, I'm Hannah, and I'm here with Anna, and neither of us are native English speakers. We're both from Ukraine. The difference between us, though, is that Anna studied her English and gained her accent in the US, and I worked on it in Ukraine. So today we're here to talk about accent acquisition in kind of like 4 parallels. First of all, can you develop your accent outside of the US? If you've never been to the US, can you sound good in English? Second is, what is the difference between gaining an accent as a child versus gaining an accent as an adult? And what are those differences when you are in the States, outside of the States? How does basically not being in the target language country affect your process? I'm here with Anna. She's a Flex alumni, and so, hey. So tell me, please, just introduce yourself a bit so that our followers can get to know you better.
Okay, so my name is Anna. As Hannah mentioned, I'm a Flex alumni. Yes, I'm 19 years old, currently studying, working, all the things at the same time. And yeah, here to tell you a little bit more about my experience with accent.
So my questions are going to be a bit of like analysis of your speech, and I'm going to be commenting on her answers from the perspective of an accent reduction specialist. I've been in this field for quite a number of years, so I kind of want to get into the details of how things are happening based on what Anna is going to be telling us. So I have 3 first questions. I kind of like to ask this question to everyone I work with so that I can understand better what background you're coming from. So when you went to the US, how old were you when you went there? How much time did you spend there?
Okay, so I went there when I was 15 to 16 years old.
Okay.
Basically, it was the iconic years of 19 to 20 when we all met COVID.
Right.
So I faced it in the States, actually.
Jesus.
Yeah, the apocalypse or something.
Yeah, I remember those times.
Yeah.
Crazy times. Okay, all right. And pay attention to the time period she was there for. So how long did you stay here for again?
Like 7 months approximately.
Okay, so 7 months, 15 to 16 years old. For accent training, that's actually a pretty late period. So usually if you want to build your accent on your own, or you have children who want to build their accents on their own, it's best to do it before you're 14. Because there's a process in your brain. The way it works is during the first, let's say, 13 to 14 years of your life, of course, the line is not set in stone, your brain is perceiving a lot of information from the outside world. And in terms of language, it's trying to understand what sounds are going to be relevant, what sounds I need to continue being able to hear. So as a kid, you're able to hear sounds of all the different languages, from African to English or, you know, Chinese, any kind of African languages, which there are so many, you can hear it all. But then as you basically never encounter those languages and you don't communicate in those languages, your brain is like, I don't need to store all of that information, keep all of that space just in case my brain maybe someday will be able to speak it. It kind of understands that, okay, this is the language that I'm able to communicate in or will be able to communicate in later on. This is the language that maybe like 1, 2, 3, it can be honestly quite a bit, quite a few of them. But regardless of how many your brain perceives it, and it's like, okay. And past 14, so after you turn 14, that's when it happens, roughly, of course. The time period is not set again in stone, and it's actually periodic in those first years of your life. But your brain is basically doing something like it shrinks all the data, very much like computer. It takes it
cleans the cache.
Exactly. No, it's more like, you know, zip folder, and that's what it does. It consolidates the information and saves whatever is the most essential info. So one of the biggest advice I can give to children or parents is to expose your children early on in their lives, and when you do that exposure, try to make it to the languages you might want them to speak in the future, be it English or any other language in the world, because they will be able to obtain and retain all of that sound info. So for you, you were 15 to 16, which shows a point that it is not set in stone, right? You can kind of overcome it, but the period that you're in is a little bit shaken. I'm wondering how it's influenced your whole experience, maybe now, maybe back in the day. But we'll, I'm sure, get back to that. So now another really important point is, did you stick to your own, or did you just like try to speak English most of the time?
Well, I was a huge fan of high school American dramas. So when I got to the States, I was like, no, I'm not communicating with like hours.
Okay,
no,
with Ukrainians.
Yeah, the tribe is not for me.
Yeah.
So I decided to dig into the culture, to find friends who speak English, obviously, like all this, I don't know, dramas, Netflix, and etc., 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 like Snapchat and all these things. So yeah, I had like several friends probably from Ukraine, but barely communicated with them, and the only huge communication that I had in our native language was probably with my parents, like through video chat, but which was not every day, of course.
Yeah.
So I on purposely put myself into a situation where I would be surrounded by American culture, by English, and by all the media basically as well.
Nice. So basically you have, I want to highlight two very important points, which are simultaneously little pieces of advice for you. First is communication. And that goes for both adults and children, but especially for children. If you want your child to sound better in English or speak English better later on in life, what you need to do is engage them in the communication process. So listening to audiobooks, podcasts, and watching videos on YouTube, whatever, it's good, it works, but it's not enough. Communication is really how you can natively perceive the language, right? Like you listen to the sounds and it just kind of builds into your system without putting too much effort into it. Now, when you're an adult, that situation changes. And that's where we see the difference. So for adults, watching videos, watching little cartoons, good, sure, helpful, but it's not gonna build your accent. So it's really important to remember that, because we as adults, for the same process, pruning, that happens when you're a child, we simply cannot hear the sounds of English the way that they are. We already have our concept about the language. So we kind of think, if you take a look at our letter A, right? And it's pronounced in Ukrainian as A. So you will transfer that information into English and you will start saying that letter is an A or whatever, without realizing that that's actually not how it sounds. And so to be able to overcome that, you first need to kind of prep your brain a little bit and then do that. Do the shadowing, watch videos, stuff like that. But largely, if you just sit down as an adult, start watching videos, it's not going to be too helpful. So the first point that I want to take a look at is communication is absolutely key. And it's amazing that you did a lot of that. And you wanted to immerse yourself into that world. Now, when it comes to the second point is, I think it's like even more important, and that goes into language learning as well, is that you were overcoming yourself, right?
Yeah.
I bet you were. I bet there were some barriers that you had to overcome to communicate, because I know so many people who are shy to talk. Yeah. What was your experience with that?
Yeah, like almost everybody, I had some barriers with my accent and like with the language itself, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, the living of the comfort zone is crucial in this whole situation, this whole story. But I guess the first point happened to me when we just arrived into the States and crossed the border. When, of course, I have a visa that I'm Flex alumni, student visa. And the officer asks me, like, what the purpose of you being here? And I'm like, I feel completely lost, because for the first time, some actual American is talking to me, like straight in my face.
Overwhelming.
Yeah, but I had a chance of my good mate, who's a boxer, coming up to me and being like, hey, you can talk. And I was like, okay, just don't beat me anymore. And like, because of a threat of being physically tortured, I decided to torture my mental stuff. So I had to break this barrier. And after this situation, I was like, okay, I'm not that terrified of it. I can try. I can put out myself out there. So
yeah, you just gotta try, right? A few times. And so many people don't allow themselves to do that simply because they're just like afraid to try it. It was also
judgment.
a moment for me too. Yes, judgment, being afraid of it. And we're going to talk about it later too, because judgment is a big part of accent training work. But from my perspective, I mean, my moments was a bit different from yours. We'll get back to it a bit later. But my first moment where I had to really overcome myself was really just like my parents pushing me out of my comfort zone, dropping me in situations where there was no other language but English, and making me use it. Like, even if I didn't want to, there was simply no other choice. And like throwing myself out there really was super helpful. And that was, you know, in the times when we didn't have Google Translate, because that's easier, a lot easier now. But back in the day, I was just like, yeah, I kind of had to. And it seems like you also kind of had to. And it's amazing to have some support from a side of your friend. That's very special.
Yeah,
very special.
Especially kicking support,
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know. Cool. So tell me now, you went to the US. You spent a few months there from 15 to 16. But I bet you didn't come there or speaking well already.
No.
So you had a more of Ukrainian accent, Slavic accent. And so when you arrived there, what tricks did you use with yourself to make your accent better? Because I know, like, I mean, there's a variety of those things, and I get to learn a lot of them just by speaking to people who did it themselves versus people who didn't do it themselves. But what was, how did you do it? What was the process like?
Well, first and foremost, as I said, communication for sure. Like, I would just come up to people, talk to them, and I hear some word that is not very popular, for example, in our country, and I would make a situation so the person tells me this unknown word, for example, and I try to reply using the same word, like trying to remember, to memorize how it sounds actually in my brain.
Yeah.
The same as like with understanding that there are different, like each person, even in the States, has different accent.
Yeah.
Like English has different accents. But when you're in that environment, you understand that they don't say water, but they say like water, like a little bit more, like they just eating up some letters, they are making the sounds longer. So I would say that for me, maybe because of my age, it was more like a playful experience, because I would just play around with the sounds, like somewhere longer, somewhere shorter, like take away the letter completely, for example. So like you just basically listen to different stories of people and create a pattern for yourself, and just use like a board in your head.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Okay, so tell me a bit about that, because that schematic strategizing is also something very common. Like if you study language and accent acquisition, I guess. What does that board look like? Do you visualize that? How does that process look inside your head, if you can describe that?
Oh, that's gonna be hard. Well, yeah, obviously it's some kind of visualizing. Thanks God I'm good friends with my imagination.
Nice.
So yeah, as I said, for example, I take some word, let's take, circumstances, for example, and I'm like having this friend Julie in my head, how she said it, like this friend Peter over here, how he said it, what's common, what's different, and then like create one new pronunciation in my head, basically. And then like practicing it, and of course I would revise it so many times just to myself, like talking to myself, for example.
Right.
So I guess even some people can be ashamed of talking to themselves, because like I'm not schizophrenic or something, but actually it's really helpful.
It is.
So basically I even heard that you know such a technique.
Yeah, it is.
And of course I use it just intuitionally and like without any credits, but I was like, yeah, this is really helpful.
Yeah,
really
so what we see here, that's a little feedback to you. It's absolutely fascinating how people that are younger, and as you said, you were a bit more intuitive with it, but you are intuitively finding those strategies that we later employ in like accent training for adults. So for whatever reason, adults lose that ability to intuitively play around with their language. Some don't, of course. And so it's so interesting because, for example, one of the best tips I can give to people who are actively working on their accent, both as children and as adults, but even more so as adults, if you're especially undergoing accent training process, is talk to yourself. That way you kind of consolidate this image of, oh, this is how I sound in English. And you get more practice, and it's a very safe space. Because a lot of times when you go out and you start speaking with someone on the street, I mean, it's a situation that's emotional, right? You're not ready, like whatever. You're talking to other people. As an adult, it's of course a lot harder. Like for you, it took 3 months because you're young and your brain is kind of like a sponge, right? It kind of inhales everything. Whereas as an adult, it's a little bit more difficult. And so for you to make it better and to get used to, oh, okay, this is how I sound in English, but the right way, the more correct way. It's really helpful to speak to yourself and to create little stories, like even narrate, walk around the house when you're doing the dishes or whatever, like you're cleaning up, and just go over everything that happened that day and take a look at, oh, okay, that sounds a bit weird in English, right? Like, let me change that. And of course, if that's paired with accent training where you actually know how to change that, it brings absolutely incredible results. Like the difference between someone who does get to a point of speaking English well and not speaking English well is someone who works like this. They retell, that's another tip, retell, monologue a lot out loud, and then kind of are like, okay, like we're working on this sound. Okay, how did that sound? Okay, that did not sound too good. How can I make it better? So was that process similar to you?
Yeah, kind of. I guess I can also refer to the example of, I think everybody once in a while at least had some TV show, American one that they like, and watching it with subtitles. For example, I loved Carrie Bradshaw, and I would just like play around with her accent, just like going around the house and pretending I'm Carrie Bradshaw.
There you go. Yes, it's very cool, imaginative work.
Like it's like New York accent, like all this cool stuff. So yeah, I think a lot of people can apply this to their daily routine, and it's not going to make you seem crazy. Right. But the accent will for sure get better. Absolutely.
I really want to point out to you guys, though, that one of those intuitive strategies, right, and we spoke about so many, I feel like just now, with mimicking accents, right, and all of these are amazing strategies that you can employ in your accent training with the help of someone, which I definitely recommend because you get some feedback. But here it's some of that visualization, creating schema, super important. Then it's the imaginative work and like pretending to be someone, playing a character, and thus finding who you are. Super important. We do actually use it in accent training. Shadowing, right, which is essentially what you're doing here too, with a little bit more of the acting side to it. Then what else were you? Repeating your friends and repeating words after them. Incredible that you were able to figure it all out. But like we actually study that. Like in our line of work, there are papers that are being written on it, and like the brain is also studied of, oh, okay, how does that happen? So it's really amazing how children can perceive this language acquisition. I mean, very intuitively. It's absolutely amazing. It's absolutely crazy. And another thing that like you have perceived. And you know, all of those things you maybe were doing intuitively, but I also look and I offer you to look at Anna's mouth, go back in the video, rewind a little bit where she talks, and you also move the muscles of your face in a very American way when you speak English. So like, I mean, I kind of study a lot of that because it's more articulatory based approach where we're looking at how people move their mouths, right? We're not looking at sounds because imagine you as an adult cannot hear certain sounds of English. That's just the way it goes. So we need to work around that. And how we start that work is we'll look more at something tangible, the mouth, right? How do you move your lips? How do you move here? How do you move there? You know, how does the tongue move? So things you can take a look at in the mirror, things you can observe for yourself or feel inside of your mouth, and then connect the idea that, okay, that sound is produced when I move my tongue, like R, for example, right? When you press with the blades of your tongue against the upper back teeth. Okay, yeah, it's a bit hard to conceptualize around it. But, you know, you figure it out as an adult with the help of someone who gives you feedback that, okay, that sounds good, that doesn't sound good, and eventually you just come to understanding that. And you, again, intuitively, very subconsciously picked up the movement of the linguistic apparatus, which is really important because a Ukrainian person does not move their mouth, does not engage the same muscles that, let's say, an American does or a British person does. And it's really crazy cool that we are able to retrain ourselves as children, again, super intuitively. We don't have, as adults, right, as anyone who's past the age of 14, we don't have that ability as much. So we need to be more strategic about it. That's the main outtake that I want you to take from this piece. It's that here Anna as a child, and most of your children, or if you are one, will be more perceptive intuitively if they're put in the right society, right?
Environment.
Surrounding environment, exactly. And as an adult, you go through a very similar process, but you kind of need someone, first of all, to help you with it, because you don't know. You're kind of blind in that. You can't hear half of the sounds that are there. And the strategies are more tangible, let's say.
Okay, so yeah, so this is like a part of my experience, but I guess we still have like kind of different experience because you mentioned that you like learned your accent like here in Ukraine. So I'm wondering, how did you come to your accent, because it's great.
So my experience was a bit different, but I feel like we have a lot of similarities. First, we both started English early, right? It kind of entered our lives. I was also eager to learn it and to like be immersed in the American culture, so I totally get that part. Then it's the sense of musical hearing, and you got to understand that not everyone will have it. And yes, having a sense of musical hearing is really helpful. My experience is slightly different. I was just like some girl in Ukraine who wanted to sound better in English, who wanted to travel the world, be global, live abroad, all of that stuff. I really just like wanted to discover the world because it's so big. And so I started learning English, and I started picking up that sounds are a bit different. And I didn't have, the ability to go to the US, but I was watching videos, I was listening, I was going to school and, trying to play out the way the language is spoken. Also, like you said, playing with shadowing. For you, it was Six in the City. For me, it was Gossip Girl. I was just like going over and over and over Serena's audio. And as a child, that will work perfectly well. As an adult, unfortunately not, because you lost the ability to hear the sounds, unless you have a really good sense of musical hearing. But even then, it's a lot more difficult to do that, and you need a little bit of preparation. So that's how it went for me. Then I went traveling. My parents took me traveling, and I had no choice but to speak English, because my parents, they didn't know how to speak English, so I was the only communicator in the family, and it kind of like you have to do it, you know? So I went and I did it, and that's how I broke my barrier. Another point here is that I'm really grateful that a lot of those people had good accents, because it makes me very sad when I see teachers in Ukraine not have a good accent, because honestly, so many problems could be resolved from this.
Yeah, it's actually a big problem.
It
Like
is.
in our school, for example, we had to deal with bullying actually from English teachers, because they have a very Soviet Union accent, like a very pretty much.
They never had any exposure.
Yeah, exactly. And when I came back from the States and she tells me that I'm saying something wrong, and I'm like, like, are you sure about that? Like, I was there, not you. And like, she's like, these teachers would just like knock me out by saying something like, I don't know, you think they're the smartest one or something like this. So yeah, it's something that we should actually work on.
I definitely agree with that. It's kind of really sad that even happens, because I mean, it's sad from both perspectives, because I wish our teachers could learn how to sound better, right? Because then the children would be able to receive their pronunciation. And that's honestly one of the goals of my work, to be able to teach, like, go governmental, like go on that level, and have a program to teach teachers so that they can pass the knowledge towards the students. Let's get back to you. So you enter the United States, and I would imagine for the first couple of weeks, perhaps, you are not speaking with the right accent. How long did it take you to establish, like, to basically work on your accent when you came there?
I would say like completely like 3 months approximately, something like this.
Okay, all right. And so during those 3 months, right, it was not exactly perfect, right, the accent. Were there any moments where you were uncomfortable because of your accent?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I don't know, maybe people would know Frozen 2.
Yeah.
It came up exactly the year that I arrived to the States, and I wanted to go like to the cinema with my friend, and she was like, nah, I not really want to go with you, I'm sorry, because I would have to explain to you the words. And I was like, but I know the words. And she was like, yeah, but it's kind of different, and like you won't understand the accent completely. And it was actually like humiliating experience, honestly, for me, because I knew the language. I did.
Of course. Yeah.
Of course, sometimes for some, I don't know, slang words, I would ask like her, like, hello, what does it mean?
Yeah.
But the cartoon, like, are you serious? It's like 3+ radio, like, yeah.
Yeah, man. Oh, that's so
Yeah.
bad. That's so bad. Really, for real. That's really bad. I'm really sorry that happened to you, dude. Wow. And honestly, I hear a lot of those stories. Like when clients come to me, both in workplace or outside of it, they're telling me some stories along the lines of those. And I'm like, that naturally, like, I imagine you were, how old were you?
15.
It's like such an age, right? Like your self-worth.
No parents.
Right. No parents around. Exactly. Your self-worth is being formed at that moment. And to have someone, Jesus Christ, it's horrible. It's really horrible. Did you end up seeing the movie after all?
Yeah, with my 5-year-old host brother.
Okay. Wow.
Well,
okay.
he didn't understand much as well, so.
Okay. All right. But you did though.
I was there for
Right.
popcorn, so.
Okay. I see.
And the same situation was not the same, worse.
Okay.
Was with my other friend who was also participant of Flex program. He was from Georgia. And of course they have a little bit different accent in, in Georgia.
Yes.
He got into a very, very religious family.
Okay.
And he got kicked out of that family. It was a huge scandal.
No way.
Yeah, because there was a huge misunderstanding between them. Because they thought he said something that he actually didn't say, just because his accent ruined a little bit the word.
Oh, okay.
And just switched the meaning. And when the Department of State had to come and ask what happened, he had to write it down, like showing what exactly he said.
So they removed him from the family because he mispronounced something.
Yeah. It like
and
offended his feelings.
Right, because they're religious.
Yeah.
Wow, that I've never heard such an intense story, to be honest. To have someone kicked out of a family, like imagine how stressful it must have been for him.
Yeah.
He was in a different country, as a teenager as well, right?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Wow, poor guy, honestly. Wow. And I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of situations like that happening even as for adults, because like one of the things that I work with, for example, is helping people have a better accent. And it's really important for me that I really I make a distinction, I make a point here that I'm not trying to teach you how to completely mimic the American accent so you lose your identity. No, I kind of see it as a tool to communicate better if you need to, but also if you want to preserve your authenticity, you have basically these two tools instead of one, right? You can speak with your native, whatever, Ukrainian accent, Georgian accent, and that's great. And it's absolutely useful and beautiful. And I find a lot of accents sounding really quirky, and I think a lot of people would agree with me. But sometimes it can simply be not useful for you. And like in this situation, and we see that a lot on a different scale, though, because I mean, that is brutal, man. That is a really brutal story. Yeah. But with, for example, people who are workers, like people from India, a lot of times they will not be employed because it's simply impossible to understand them.
Yeah,
you want to communicate, but unfortunately you cannot. And that's so painful to me because there's so many beautiful minds and really smart people. And that's part of the reason why I want to change that. You can speak very good English, but if you don't have a good enough accent, you will, like, let's say you sound Slavic, right? You will be on some level, and it's really good to work on that. And the reality is that not everyone, like not even the majority of people work on that. Yeah. There are stereotypes, right? You are, I don't know if you have ever been faced with those stereotypes about like Ukrainian women and...
Yeah, sadly. I think everybody...
Yeah, so have I. And it's just really, really sad to be faced with that on the linguistic level because like you start speaking and immediately there's this picture. And as a woman, like, there's a lot of that good wife story or like beautiful women that are amazing cooks and stuff like that, which is horrific. On the male side, it's like they sound very rude and very like, like a caveman, which is, again, it's just horrible, but that's part of the reality that we live in. And so to negate that, it's really nice when we can speak with a better accent, thus showing to the world that, no, you know what? Ukrainians are very intelligent. Yeah. Like, you shouldn't be discriminated on how you speak because we have so many, and around the world, not just in Ukraine, there's so many people who are just amazing individuals, really skilled workers that are being paid a fraction of what they deserve or what they would be paid outside of their country or even in their country if they were able to speak better and present their case to, let's say, the company or whatever. And so that intelligence discrimination, where I look at you, I speak to you, you might be very smart, but I'm not gonna see that way. I'm gonna be like, oh, you know, or whatever. A native speaker is gonna be. Yeah, and that's, I mean, that hurts.
Yeah.
You know, it's really hurtful, and that's part of the reason why accent reduction specialists even exist. Because once I saw that, I was like, oh, wow, that is crazy. Let's talk about something happier. So you've gone through that process, right? You spend your 3 months, and in those 3 months, you've worked on your accent. Tell me a few things, like when was that moment? When was that time when you were like, okay, I got it. You know, I sound good. People understand me. What was that aha moment? Because it always happens.
Probably 2 aha moments.
Okay.
So the first one was like in November, I believe. So it was a homecoming party.
Yeah.
And my group of friends just like disappeared, like completely on the pep rally. And they were kids from other school, and I started communicating with them, and they never asked me where I'm from. Like they knew I belonged there.
Yeah.
And later on, after that event, there was also an event as a participant of Flex.
Yeah.
I had to take part in it, and I was really blessed to take part in it.
Yeah.
It was International Week, basically, to represent our countries where we come from.
Yeah.
And I made a whole presentation. I made cookies, like hearts with blue and yellow color.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, I tried my best.
Huh.
And basically, I did a presentation, and several students were like, hold on, like, don't you speak English in Ukraine? I'm like, no, we speak Ukrainian. We have Ukrainian language in our country. And he goes like, no way, like you wouldn't speak English like that if you didn't have it in Ukraine. And I was like, yeah, probably doing something right. But the thing that shocked them the most was when I showed them the picture of Kyiv mayor.
Okay.
Like the one when he was like boxing and the other one in the suit. They were blasted.
I bet. Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. I mean, they are interesting characters, right? They really are very funny.
Yeah.
But that's so cool, and it's so nice that you were able to represent our culture there, right? Where, I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing that people thought that you are a good speaker, that you're, you know, and that people in Ukraine, their main language is English. Of course, I mean, the knowledge of geography and geolinguistics is very limited in the US. But still, it's really quite amazing that you kind of represented your culture in this way.
Yeah, before it was mainstream.
Right, exactly, exactly. There you go. And that's actually something that like my bigger picture, my bigger goal is to specifically help Ukrainians, but people from other cultures as well, because our services are not limited to Ukraine. It is to really break the chain that, you know, people from the Slavic world, they sound bad in English. And there's like, it's just such a weird stereotype, such a weird misconception. And I can't tell you how many times that happened to me. I bet it happened to you too, where I would start speaking English and someone will be like, oh, are you from the States? Like, where are you from? And I'll be like, I'm from Ukraine. And they would be like, oh, how do you know English so well? How do you sound so well?
Yeah.
Did that ever happen to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
because that, I mean, it literally happened to me yesterday. Yeah, and I really want to change that. I really want it to be like, I always said that my final goal in my work is when I am traveling, I'm in the US, and someone asks me where I'm from, and they say, I'm from Ukraine, and they're like, oh, that's why you speak English so well.
Yeah, that's global.
Yeah,
for sure.
I really want that, and I mean, you have to set your goals high, and you know,
it's a law.
maybe you'll go a little bit further down the line. Okay, but you told me there are 2 stories. The first story is this. What was the other one?
The other one was pizza.
Okay.
Story.
Okay.
I was with my friends, right, and we decided to go grab a pizza because, of course, New York pizza. Like.
Right.
And we went there, and they got their pizza, and it was like a place where you just get like huge but pieces, you know, like not a huge one.
Okay. New York slice pizza.
Yeah. It's.
I'm gonna have one after this.
Yeah, I really want one now. And basically, I come up to this adorable old man, like adorable, chubby, but so nice and friendly. And I come up to him, and I'm like, oh, so what flavors are available today, basically? And he goes like, are you from South? And I don't say anything because I'm like, well, let's see where it's gonna go.
Yeah.
And I'm saying like, why? And he goes like, so you sound like from Texas. My grandmother was from Texas. And I'm like, maybe, like, who knows? And he's like, oh, you remind me so much about my grandma. So eventually I got 3 pizzas for free.
That's
just because of an
amazing.
accent. Yeah, I still love
3
it.
slices, right?
Yeah, but I love that man too.
Oh, that's such a nice story.
Yeah.
That's very cute. He got some nice vibes from you. You got some free pizza, and it's really rewarding. Like it happens. It happened a lot of times in my life as well. But it happens so much to people that I work with. That aha moments. Whenever they come to me, like whatever students I teach, and there are a few programs that are run, eventually they will always slide into my DMs, or they will always like record a little audio message. Some will even like, talk to me personally about it, that like there comes a moment where someone around them recognizes their accent as sounding better. Or it's just like someone doesn't recognize them can't identify where they're from. They can be, oh, are you Canadian? Are you from there? Which is so nice, and it's such a big goal. And I bet you were super happy when that happened.
Of course I was, and now when I'm older, I think it's like representing you as a person of the world, because person can guess where you're from.
Exactly.
And you can be whoever you want to be.
Exactly, and that's so freeing. That's another part of the reason to do even accent training. Because yes, like you said, a person of the world, you can be discriminated, stereotyped against the backdrop of your accent. I mean, there are also, of course, plenty of other reasons to be discriminated, but at least one is taken out. Thank you so much for this little interview that you did. Do you have any more questions to me?
You are very open about any topic, so I don't have really any questions. But
I'm
I
also
hope
very
guys
wordy.
in the comments will have some questions to you.
True.
I'm sure they will have.
Yeah,
actually.
me too. I absolutely love communicating. You see, I'm quite good at it, I would imagine. I talk a lot. I talk fast. I'm very emotional around it, and I would absolutely appreciate if you guys could leave comments with questions, or maybe you have some commentary about this, because we talked about a lot of topics. I would love if you shared your stories. I do read them. I respond to them. I'm very communicative on every social media platform that I'm at. Please subscribe. That would make me just the happiest, because we've put a lot of work into this, okay? You don't see it, but there's so much work behind this. And it's also one of my first videos. It's, of course, really scary to be putting it out on the internet, but I really want to help you become better in your pronunciation and kind of drive forward my mission in this world that I spoke about today. So I'd really appreciate your follow, your thumbs up, your comments, whatever, following me on different social media as well. And I will see you in the next one. See ya. Bye-bye.